I thank the gentleman. And now I recognize the chairman of the Early Childhood, Elementary, and Secondary Education Subcommittee and a passionate educator himself, Mr. Kiley from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've just received the latest test scores for students across this country, and they are absolutely alarming. What we see is that the trend continues to be one of decline, as you can see in this chart right here. The bottom part of the graph shows from 2013 to the present average scores in reading and in math, 4th and 8th grade. And then the top of the chart is particularly interesting because that shows the level of spending. The gray curve there is actually inflation. So you can see the spending line above that exceeds that. This is a steady growth in spending in real dollars that is proceeding in tandem with a steady decline in student achievement. So when we're talking about the reforms that are going to be considered by the president as well as by this committee, I certainly welcome any arguments against them that seek to identify what the implications of those reforms might be. But there are two responses that I think are wholly inadequate and are frankly the only responses we've really heard today from the other side of the dais. Number one is defending the status quo. This is the status quo. It is failure, continuing decline, a continual dimming of the prospects of America's young people, and a diminished capacity of America to lead the world. And the second response, also inadequate, is to say the solution is to just spend more money under the current system. Because as we can see, there has been an inverse relationship between spending and student achievement. So, Mr. Taylor, you mentioned this earlier, that simply spending more money doesn't necessarily help matters. Why do you believe that is, that we see this actually inverse correlation between spending and student achievement?
Well, because we ultimately refer to the K through 16 system as the people who produce the product that we employers buy. And we are increasingly seeing a lower quality product come out of the K through 16 system. So sadly, if we go back to the manufacturer, the K through 12 system ultimately manufactures the parents, but when you get into the system and you ask them and they say, well, we're spending more money on it, and we are telling them, but you're not giving us what we need. There's not enough volume, and the people who do come through often, your product often does not have the skills. And some of those are what you call soft skills, we call power skills. They don't know how to interact with other employees. They don't know how to work on teams. They don't know how to show up to work on time. Sure. There's a startling statistic that 20% of right now, Gen Z parents are showing up to the interviews with them. Like, this is what's happening in the workplace. So we're saying, got it. You're spending a lot of money, but we're going to tell you on the other end of this that the product that you're receiving and delivering to us is suboptimal.
Right, and this is a characterization of the system as a whole. However, there are examples of schools and school systems that do quite well, that have an excellent educational product. And I'm very grateful that the chair has trusted me to lead the subcommittee that spans K-12 education as well as pre-K. And our overarching goal is going to be to look at how can we make it so these examples of really good schools and good school systems become the norm rather than the exception. And I think that there are principles that you can clearly identify with successful school systems. They allow flexibility in terms of how schools are operated. They demand accountability for actual outcomes. And then they provide parents and families with choices. Now, this, of course, is generally a characterization of how charter schools work. And charter schools have been very successful in many states across the country. So some of the priorities that our committee is going to focus on are, number one, the question of funding. How do we reimagine the role of the federal government in education, both when it comes to the bureaucracies that exist and how funding gets allocated? Number two is how can we support school choice in states and hold states accountable for policies that run against school choice, whether that be for charter schools or other forms of choice. Number three is how can we assist educators across the country in incorporating the very powerful personalized learning tools that advances in technology have made available. Number four, is examining how literacy is being taught across this country. There are still way too many districts and states that don't properly teach literacy. Number five is expanding the role of career education, which I know is a major priority of the chair. And number six is we need to look at the broken nature of special education funding, which is clearly inadequate for many districts, causing many districts to have to then dip into their general fund budget and isn't giving students with special needs and their families the support that they need. So I think that we have a tremendous opportunity, Mr. Chair, to catalyze absolutely amazing education reform across the country that will go a long way towards helping millions of kids and better preparing our country for global leadership in the future. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and we wish you well on those ideas and challenges.